So how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Now remind me, what's your name?
That's Chris.
Chris, right. So I'm Lenore. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you for willing to do this.
You're welcome.
So I did look up and see all the photos and newspaper articles about the Marilyn Monroe rock opera that you did, and I,
Right.
I didn't want to just ask what your experience was working on that.
Sure. Well, it was interesting because I was 16 when I started acting, 15 when I started doing school musicals, and then 16 I was doing community amateur theater, and got cast in my first professional theater production, playing small roles. Same when I was 17. Then when I was 19, I was doing a small roles over at a musical theater company here called the Charlottetown Festival in Prince Edward Island, where they do Anne of Green Gables, the musical. And I was understudying Anne for all the shows. Never did get to go on stage as Anne, unfortunately. But at the end of that summer, they do a concert every year where people in the cast of the shows who feel that they perhaps didn't get a chance to really show what they can get a chance to do a couple of numbers that will show their true talent. Mm-hmm. So I did a couple of musical numbers. One of them was a Barbra Streisand song from Funny Girl, the musical Funny Girl, yeah, called The Cornet Man. And I did it as like a Marlene Dietrich imitation. And it was a pretty raunchy song, sexy song. And this composer happened to be in the audience with his wife that night. And he had written a rock opera on the life of Marilyn Monroe. And he'd been searching for the right actor to play Marilyn for about a year. He'd looked in LA, New York, across Canada, but he just hadn't found the one that he felt was perfect for the role. And when I came out and did that number of The Cornet Man, he told me later that he and his wife turned to each other and said, "That's Marilyn." Mm-hmm. And that's how my career was really born. I played the lead in that musical at the age of 19. And I played Marilyn from the age of 16 when she was just Norma Jean Baker to the age of 36 when she died of an overdose of booze and drugs. And so that was an amazing experience for a young actor, not only because of the subject material, but also because, to be honest, and I haven't talked about this before, I don't think, in any of my interviews, so you're the first I'm telling you this, but the man who was the director of that show was an older man, a British man. He had done Oliver on the West End in London and also on Broadway, and very respected. And but he started coming on to me during rehearsals. And it was really, really frightening, because a part of me was scared that if I said no, did that mean I was going to get sent home packing with my bags back home to my parents? But I had the wherewithal to stand up to him and say no. I even went out and bought myself an engagement ring and told everybody that my boyfriend back home had sent it to me in a letter and that I was now engaged. But that didn't deter him. But I had to sort of deal with that sexual harassment for the whole show. And then opening night, he punished me by not directing me, by leaving it up to me just to do whatever. And in a way, that also became an incredible lesson, because I had to suddenly direct myself, block myself. And the performance that I gave on opening night was by and large self-directed. So when the audience jumped to their feet and gave me a standing ovation, and all the critics said, you know, a star is born and whatever. I deep down inside, I knew that, you know, it was something that I had done myself and created against all odds. So thanks for asking me about that, because it's a very difficult situation for many young people and women and men too, when someone in a position of authority, you know, tries to use and manipulate them for their own sexual purposes.
Mm-hmm. And could you personally relate to anything about Marilyn?
Yes, I did. I could. I think many young women in particular, and gay men as well, relate to Marilyn, because no matter how beautiful and brilliant she was, she never really had the self-love and acceptance that she needed. She was always trying to fulfill other people's fantasies. And she had a void inside of a need for approval. Mm-hmm. But what she never realized was that she needed to approve of herself and give herself self-love and approval. So she was always trying to fill that void with, you know, drugs, alcohol, men, an adoring public. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough until you reach the point where you can have self-acceptance. And I think in some ways Rogue is like that too, because, you know, if you jump to like the Cure in the X-Men, when Rogue goes out trying to find a cure so she's no longer a mutant, so she can be in love and be intimate with people, she finally realizes at the end of all of that actually you can't change who you are, and why would you want to? You need to accept who you are and love who you are. So I think that's a theme that has kind of followed me, and in some ways I'm still learning it.
Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to read too, that for the rock opera too, that they were originally trying to get Beverly D'Angelo.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. I can relate to her too. I think we have similarities, and yeah, it was a great experience for a young actor though. You know, that kickstarted my career.
Mm-hmm. And then of course, after that, being involved in a lot of big cult following horror movies, is there one experience that stands out to you with Happy Birthday to Me or Visiting Hours? Or
yeah, well, Visiting Hours was great because I got to work with a number of wonderful actors, you know, and Happy Birthday to Me was interesting because I got to work with a director who had was quite a legend in the States. I just remember that a lot of us as young performers there, we were doing a lot of horror films in the 80s. Mm-hmm. In Canada anyway. And I would have liked to do a lot more serious roles, but there just weren't a lot of those coming forth. The film industry was quite young in Canada, and horror films were a way for producers to make their money back pretty quickly. So there were a lot of those being done. And that's why in some ways I was known as the Scream Queen, the Canadian Scream Queen, you know, for the 80s, because I did so many of those movies, and I mean, I was murdered in so many nefarious ways. I like I said, I kind of wish I would have been able to do a lot more serious movies, but it was a very good way of learning how to, you know, work with a camera, work with a crew, hit your spot, know your lines, know your angles. So it was an excellent training in that way, and I did so many of them.
Mm-hmm. And I was wondering too, there's much of a story with American Nightmare.
American Nightmare. The only story there was that my boyfriend at the time was also playing in it, and he played my boyfriend, who his name was Charles Fletcher, or Page Fletcher. He ended up he was the hitchhiker in the TV series The Hitchhiker. And he also played RoboCop in a TV series about RoboCop. And when we were teenagers in Nova Scotia, used to hitchhike together everywhere. We'd hitchhike to the amateur theater company we were both in. And it's just funny that years later he got a part called, The Hitchhiker. But in that movie, he played my boyfriend who was really angry and upset and didn't want me to strip anymore, which in the movie I was doing because we needed the money.
Mhm.
And it's funny because in real life, it was the same thing. I played that role, even though, I would have preferred to do more serious, more meaty kind of roles. But we needed the money. We were living together. We had an apartment, and we both needed the money. So we did the movie, but it was funny because real life was really reflecting what was going on stage, on film too.
Mhm. Hadn't really seen you talk about Something's Afoot before.
Oh yeah, Something's Afoot. That was a great show with Andy Gibb and
Yep.
Gene Stapleton. That was fantastic. They were both excellent to work with, lots of fun. Jean is a master. She's just such an amazing actress. And, most people would see her and think of Archie Bunker and expect her to sound like that, but she didn't. She sounded like a normal human being. And just so smart and funny and witty and kind. So we had a real blast together, and Andy and I we dated throughout that show. So I ended up spending a lot of time with him, both on screen and off, and that was very interesting as well. I again, he was a very kind human being, but very tortured in the sense that he was an addict. I mean, his cocaine issues were pretty clear by that time, and also the fact that he always felt like he was in his brother's shadow.
Yeah.
And that he wasn't a BG. He really wanted to be a BG.
Mhm.
And it didn't even matter the fact that he had a great solo career. It would never be enough for him because he wanted to be one of the Bee Gees. And that was an eye-opener for me as well, to see somebody who's handsome, wealthy, loved, and talented, but again, who has this inner void that they try to fill with many other things. But until they can learn to accept themselves and love themselves, that hole will never be filled. And so again, I think I was 22 when I did that show with him. Yeah, so there's a sadness and a sweetness attached to those memories.
Mhm. And sort of related to that, what is the case where you've been the most starstruck in terms of who you've worked with?
Well, I'd have to say in my own case, that was when I ended up getting to do Law and Order in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And I did that with Jerry Orbach and also Sam Waterston, who were two of my favorite actors. Sam Waterston I had loved ever since I'd seen The Great Gatsby, the original one, and The Killing Fields. And Jerry Orbach had done all these musicals in his younger years. He was like a star of the musical theater on Broadway. So as a young kid growing up in a small country town, my dad had a record player, and I would always want to get records that had all these Broadway musicals. And I learned the musicals through listening to them and listening to Jerry Orbach play, say, The Fantastics. He was El Gallo. And I played the girl. When I was 16, I played Louisa, the girl in The Fantastics. I played Carrie Pipperidge in Carousel, Oklahoma, Guys and Dolls, all of these great, great Broadway musicals. There he was in all of them. So when I got to work with him in New York, it was a dream come true. It was one of the things I set for myself, a goal that I said, when I go to New York and I'm going to be living there and working there, one of the things I want to do is get on Law and Order and work with both of those two actors. And I ended up being able to do that. And one of my best memories there with him was, it was a freezing cold day in February in New York. And the show is called Veterans Day. That's the name of the episode. It keeps playing. It's playing all the time, every year. So he said, "Hey, Lenore, come, it's too cold in the trailers, and then come sit in the limousine. We've got the driver there. It's all heated. You come and stay warm in there." So we sat and we sang show tunes to each other, and we sang duets from all of those shows that he'd been in, that I knew that I'd been in. That was being on top of the world for an actor. Being able to do that, it was brilliant. And sadly, he did die not soon, like shortly after that. I think it was leukemia that he had had for some time. So it was really sad, but I'm so glad I got to work with him and meet him. He was the kindest man and such a gentleman to everybody, to everybody on set, which I think is a theater thing. When you grow up in the theater, you learn like we're all in this together, and it's not a hierarchy of, oh yeah, you don't say anything to the person sweeping the floor or whatever, or the front of house box office manager. Like we're all in this together, and he exemplified that.
Right. Yeah. And so, on topic of voiceover, was that always something that you wanted to try and pursue?
No, I hadn't even thought of it, to be honest. My main goals when I set out was just to do theater, movies, and television. But then I found my way into radio first. I was asked to do I was asked to do an audition for a radio drama, and a friend of mine had written the play. And when he wrote the play, he told me that I had inspired him to write this play. So it was even nicer when I got the role, because I knew that I had inspired the role. And I ended up winning the Best Actress in Canada award for film, television, and radio. And actually, for that performance, and this is the statue.
Oh, wow.
It's called a Nellie. It's a Canadian original film, television, and radio award. They've changed them. They don't look like this anymore, but I just love the little fat lady naked dancing. I mean, I don't know how many of us have them. I know Anne Murray has one, but this is for my very first award as a best actor in the play Saltwater Moon by David French. And that was in 1986.
Wow.
So that's what got me started in the voice thing. So I did a lot of radio. I did a lot of radio dramas, which we were doing at that time. Our public broadcaster here in Canada, the CBC, did a lot of those kinds of shows. And so I got a lot of experience in it, loved it. But I didn't end up doing animation really until I did one called The Tooth Fairy, Where Are You? I played Dottie the Tooth Fairy. And that was kind of a one-off. And then I didn't do anymore until about 1991 or something, when I came back from New York, where I'd been doing theater. I was doing a play at the Orpheum Theater off Broadway in New York. That play was called Unidentified Human Remains and the True Nature of Love. And I did that for about 9 months there. Then I came home, and that's when my agent said that she had this audition she wanted me to do for an untitled project, which turned out to be the X-Men, and the role was Rogue.
Okay. And so what was the year that you moved to LA then?
Oh, well, I think I went back and forth. I went back and forth to LA. I think I first went there in 1980, 81. I did a movie there in 1984 called The Return with Frederick Forrest, I believe. But I would always go back and forth. I never really wanted to just be in the one place or the one city. I kept working back and forth in Canada and the States because I felt that was healthier for me. I thought in Los Angeles, it was very disconcerting in a way, because a lot of the women were, they felt like they needed to be skinny rakes. Mm-hmm. And so I'd go into auditions, and it was kind of like a Britney Spears lookalikes. Everybody was skinny, but they had big heads because you can't shrink your head, Yeah. And I just remember thinking, like, that's just not healthy. And it's not a healthy thing for the person or even for society, that women are being made to feel like they have to do that. I really preferred being around people who were, you know, normal sized, and where we were accepting of that. So that's why it was important for me to go back and forth. And so, and then, but when I went back again in 2000, 97, I went back again, and I stayed for some time. And that's when I started doing a lot of the voice stuff as well, and doing films and television in Vancouver, going back and forth between LA and Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember what your first anime project would have been then?
Oh my goodness. No, I don't. I did a ton of them. I really don't remember. All I know is that I usually, for anime, I used the name Zann.
Right.
I just, yeah.
Well, because probably outside of Aisha and Outlaw Star, probably my favorite anime role of yours is Chiriko and Fushigi Yuugi. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah. What was the name of the show again?
Fushigi Yuugi.
Yes, right. Yeah, I do remember that one. That was fun. I loved that one. And I also loved when I was doing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I did that one in New York.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is really interesting with Fushigi Yuugi too, because your character has a really, they kind of have to sacrifice themselves, if you remember much about it.
Not really. You can tell me, it might jog my memory though.
Okay, yeah, because Chiriko was a little boy, and then his body gets possessed by one of the like opposing villainous characters, and then the only way that he can save everybody else is by stabbing himself. And then yeah, I just thought that your performance and the scream that you gave as him, that was just incredible.
Thank you. That would have been from years of doing the horror films. And being the Canadian scream queen. That's where that would have been able to come from. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, and then when I did Rogue, that's where those screams would have come from too. It's from my backstory of doing horror films.
Right.
I'm good at screams. I love screams. Which was very handy when it came to Outlaw Star, mm-hmm. because my character there, Aisha Clan, oh my God, she is a screamer. She screams all the time. Yeah. Whether she's happy or not happy, she screams. That one was hard on my voice. That one was really hard on my voice. Like, you go in this booth and you're screaming all the time. It's like being a rock star, you know, like you're just out there screaming away, and that can be hard on your voice. You have to pace yourself. Mm-hmm. Lots of tea and honey.
Is there any like highlighted memory that you have of being directed by Wendy?
Just the fun that we had, you know, and it was interesting. That was one of the first animated shows that I did in Los Angeles. And it was before I started doing stuff with Universal. Like, I started doing some cartoons, like The Mummy. I did The Mummy, and the Fairly Odd Parents, and a bunch of stuff with Sue Blue, who's also an excellent director of cartoons. And Sue Blue, I took one of her courses because I wanted to enlarge in my horizons when it came to the types of roles I could play with my voice. And it was her that taught me that I could play little boys, mm-hmm. and as well as young women, or women of any age, really. And it was after that I ended up getting a role in Dragon Tales, which was another cartoon series that I think Sue might have directed. I'm trying to remember, but I played a little boy dragon in a wheelchair who could do magic tricks. And I thought that was a really sweet role, you know, especially for kids to see that someone who he doesn't miss being able to walk because he can do magic tricks, mm-hmm. you know. So, but yeah, those years were very, very educational for me of learning what to do with my voice, even beyond the regular roles that I can do.
Right. Well, that is what I was going to ask, was how your particular process was or is for doing boy voices.
for doing boy voices?
Yeah.
Well, I just I imagine that I just put my hat on backwards, and I just imagine what it's like to be an 8-year-old boy dragon in a wheelchair. I mean, just because I don't have any legs doesn't matter, because I can do magic tricks. Want to see?
Yeah.
You just use your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually have a thought or an image that I do that is a thing that I slip into the character with.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then that puts me in the head zone for that character. Fun. It's lots of fun. It's like being a kid again,
Yeah. Well, and I know too that your character in Megaman role has a pretty big following.
Yeah. And I'm wondering now, I'm trying to remember who directed that. Was that Sue Blue too? I think I did that one in Vancouver.
Oh, okay.
Like I said, I moved around a lot.
Right.
I oftentimes during the height of all of that, at one point I had a place in Toronto, a place in LA, and a place in New York. Then I sold my house in Toronto and moved out to Vancouver. So then I bought a condo in Vancouver. So I was going between Vancouver, LA, and New York. Mm-hmm. Then I was in New York and renting out my other places. But then in the very, very end, I ended up selling the place in Vancouver, and I got rid of my apartments in New York and in LA. And I moved everything home to Nova Scotia, bought a house here in Nova Scotia, close to my family, so that I could be closer to my family, because my parents are getting older and my sister's kids were just little. And I wanted to really be present. I wanted to be a hands-on auntie who wasn't just, a picture on a refrigerator, right, that you only got to see at Christmas or something like that. I decided that after 30 years of wandering and traveling, that it was time to actually unpack my suitcase and stay in one place for a while. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did.
Okay. Another major anime role, remember being in Magic Knight Ray Earth?
Yeah.
Caldina.
Yes. Caldina. She was fun too. I loved all of those characters.
And this might be obvious to ask too, but considering your experience up until that point, did you take to dubbing easier or was it harder to get used to?
Personally, I enjoy doing animation more, where it's just you acting, doing your thing, getting into the character, doing your own timing, and then they animate to you. When it's the other way around, it's not as much fun for me. I can do it, but you don't have quite the same freedom as you do when you're doing the voice first, because you have to be aware of the timing and matching your words to the mouth and trying to make it, even though it's in a different language, oftentimes trying to make it work. So, you're throwing another element into it there where you've got to have that in your mind as well. Whereas as an actor, it's nice to be able to just act and just throw yourself into the role, which is what I like to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, back when I talked to Wendy, it was around this time last year, but she said that she really wants to work with you again.
Oh, I just loved her. Is she doing anime still, or is she doing voices herself, or? Yeah,
she's doing both, like acting and directing, and
good.
Yep.
That's great. She's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other LA based voice actors that you became friends with at that time?
Well, I met SpongeBob. He was at the same agency. Yeah. There were a lot of us that were with the William Morris agency.
Okay.
At that time. And so when we would come in to do auditions at the agency, you'd get to see everybody. You'd be sitting around and working on your script or whatever before you went in. So a lot of us would see each other then. But I'm also like an on-camera actor and theater. So I had a lot of friends who were also in the industry doing other things. And So and plus music. I'm a singer and musician, so a lot of my friends were also musicians, and so Johnny Rivers, for instance, who did Secret Agent Man.
Yeah.
He was a friend, and we dated for a while as well. So that was a lot of fun as well, to get to know LA from, people who'd lived there for a long time and knew a lot of people. So yeah, it was a great time. I loved my time in LA.
Mhm.
But the world is a beautiful place, right? That's the thing. All of these cities have something to offer, and the main thing I get from traveling around is that people are the same no matter where you go. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody's working hard. And that's why, I have so much compassion for the world and wanting people to come together and accept each other and accept each other's differences, but looking for the similarities that we have too. And that's what Rogue is about as well, is about acceptance, not just accepting yourself, but accepting others.
Mm-hmm. And on the topic of Rogue, what aspects of her could you, or if there's like a single aspect that you can personally relate to the most?
I often say, well, Rogue really is me. She embodies a type of courage where she's not afraid to say what she thinks,
Mm-hmm.
and where she's not afraid to go out and fight for the underdog, for others who are not as well equipped perhaps to be able to fight off whatever the foes are that are attacking them. And even though she comes under attack herself, she'll always put someone else first before her. She is a loner. She is very strong, but she's also very vulnerable in the sense that, she really can never be intimate and skin to skin with anybody, because she's afraid that she will drain their life forces and kill them. Now, I don't have that quality, luckily. But I do relate to being a loner and traveling around the world, basically looking for yourself, trying to figure out who you are and where you fit into the scheme of things. And that's Rogue's story as well. I feel the most at home when I am performing, when I'm in a theater, when I'm on a movie set, when I'm in a studio with the headphones on performing. And Rogue found her home when she went to Professor Xavier's Academy for Gifted Mutants, where she was accepted and realized that her strengths were strengths, and that what she had thought of as weaknesses are not weaknesses. They're just parts of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And then she went out to try and teach that to others and show by her own example. And to be honest, that's what I've been doing for many years, and also partly why I went into politics too after I moved home, was to try and show young people that you can be successful no matter where you are, no matter what small town or village you come from, no matter how much money you have or you don't have. If you have a dream and you want to make something happen, you can make it happen with hard work and determination, and just don't let anyone tell you that it can't be done.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you, did they just, whoever was in charge of producing it, did for the new X-Men series, did they just reach out to you?
Yeah, they tracked me down. With their superpowers, they tracked me down to Nova Scotia. We haven't done the show for 30 years. It'll be the 30th anniversary next year. And interestingly enough, I had just completed 12 years as an elected official.
Mm-hmm.
And they found me. They called, they found my email through someone else. They got in touch with me that way. Then I told them to give me a call. I wasn't sure if it was legitimate, So the casting director phoned me, and Meredith Lane, who ended up that she is also directing it, the voices. And we had a chat, and then she asked if I would lay down an audition, and I could tell from the audition that it was Rogue that they were looking for. So and I said, do they want her older, younger, the same age? What she went, oh no, just the same as she was before. I'm like, okay, great. So I just laid it down and sent it off, and a few weeks went by, and then they called and said, okay, we'd love you to meet with the producers. So I met with Bo and Charlie, and we and Meredith, and we had a Zoom call, and I did a reading then, and the director directed me and said, try this, try that, whatever. And I love suggestions. So we did that, and we talked about the show. I was really thrilled to see that they were huge fans of the X-Men, and they knew them inside and out.
Mhm.
So that went really well. And then another few weeks went by, and then I got the message that they wanted me to reprise my role. So that was really exciting.
Mhm.
Come full circle.
And I'm sure that you've gotten a lot of messages and stories from people about how your performance as Rogue especially like changed their life or saved them in somehow.
Yeah, I have. And also at Comic Cons pre-COVID, when we went out and had a few X-Men reunions in the States, in a number of places, LA, in Texas, in Tennessee, Chattanooga, and in New Orleans. I was amazed. All of us were amazed by how many fans came up and told us that we did change their life when they were younger, that they felt alone, they felt different, they felt they weren't accepted, they didn't belong, and they would race home to see our show, and it would make them feel like they were okay.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh my God, if you can die knowing that you've done that for children, for young people, what more is there? Like that is, it makes me feel so honored that I was given that opportunity to help people. And, and I'm looking forward to being able to continue that with the continuation of the show, and
Mhm.
for a new generation of kids too.
Mhm.
Especially in this world right now. A lot of the world is in a turmoil with people really focusing on their differences instead of their similarities, and fighting each other on social media and also in the streets. When really we need to come together as one world, one tiny little world, one little blue planet, that we only have one planet, and we need to look after it, and we need to look after each other.
Mhm.
So if I can do anything to help that, that's my purpose.
Yeah, I actually had a um, story about that, how it was Fushigi Yuugi that helped me through something in that aspect, because back when I was in fourth grade, that's when I discovered the series, and just one night, me and my parents were out to eat at a restaurant that we would go to pretty often, and then it was totally normal, and then we were about to leave, and we were all told that nobody can leave, and then all of a sudden, uh, heavily armed police officers come in and turn all the lights off and tell everybody that you have to get into the two bathrooms and like huddle in there, because there was a guy who murdered two people, and he crashed his car outside the restaurant, and he was trying to get in the restaurant, and so everybody had to we all had to stay there until I think 1 a.m., and then we all had to get individually escorted to our cars. And um, I know that if I didn't have Fushigi Yuugi to like fall back on at that time, that I wouldn't have been able to get over it in any other way.
Oh, so you were feeling traumatized,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry to hear that. And that would be very upsetting for any young child.
Mhm.
But I'm glad you had something that you could fall back on, and that could take your mind off it and make you feel better. And
Mhm.
no, it's not your fault.
Right.
Thank
So I just wanted to thank you for
you for
being,
sharing that. I appreciate that so much.
yeah. And yeah,
Wow.
my final question is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. I think just that she was there to help people and to comfort people and to give people inspiration to keep going no matter what, to never give up hope.
Hmm.
Never give up, because you may be in a rut and miserable and desperate today, but you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And believe me, it can get better, and it will if you hang on.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And is there something that you would want to tell your younger self?
I'd like to tell my younger self, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I keep having to tell myself that anyway, no matter what. Just, it's going to be okay. Whenever things change suddenly, or you lose a job, or in this case, I had a terrible, awful couple of years. My lovely young niece, Maya Lee, was a beautiful adopted child from China, and my sister and brother-in-law went over to China to adopt her when she was 9 months old, and she's brought so much love and joy and light into our family. And she sadly was diagnosed with terminal cancer, osteosarcoma, a year ago, and we were only given maybe a month for her to live, like maybe till Christmas. So she had to have her leg amputated, and in a bid to save her life. But she ended up living for another 7 months, or 6 or 7 months, till the summer when she passed. But she was the bravest young person I've ever seen. She never let it get to her. She said, life is better when you're laughing. She said, I'm just going to live for the moment and enjoy it as to the best of my ability. And she did. She lived with grace and dignity, and she died with grace and dignity. And I miss her every day. Christmas is not going to be a happy one in our family this year, but I think of her, and I think of all the kids out there that are suffering, and I say, I just want to be there for them and give them some kind of hope, and we're all in this together.
Hmm. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. And thanks. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Me too. It's a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, Chris.
Yeah.
Have a
Bye.
good night and
You too.
happy holidays.
Yeah, you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.